The kingdom of my divine will in the midst of creatures. Book of Heaven, Volume 35, Part 5. October 19th, 1937. How the divine will forms the most holy Trinity in the creature who lives in it. Wonders of the acts done in it. How true love begins from oneself. The divine will, fecundator and sower of divine life in the souls. The divine volition continues to invest me. I feel its motion within me, speaking as it moves, but with such eloquence that if it did not make a prodigy in order to let itself be understood, I would not be able to repeat what it says. Even more, it adapts itself to my capacity, because if it speaks, its word, being a creative word, it wants to create the good contained in its word. And if I did not understand it, I would not be able to make that good my own, nor give it to others as property of the supreme Fiat. So I felt concerned, thinking, how can it be that its motion is word? And my sweet Jesus, visiting my poor soul, all love, told me, blessed daughter of the divine volition, you must know that wherever my will reigns with its creative power, its motion is word. Hence, it speaks in the works, in the steps, it speaks in the mind, in the breathing. Wanting to establish its kingdom, my will speaks, in order to create its divine life in each active creature. Therefore, it takes highest attention in order to hear where it wants to begin its teachings. By the power of its word, it invests the human act, the human breath, heartbeat, thought, and word, and forms in them its divine work. The divine breath, heartbeat, thought, and word. These acts rise up to heaven. They present themselves before the sacrosanct Trinity, and our divinity looks at these acts. And what do we find? We find ourselves, our life, and the very most holy Trinity reproduced in these acts. We look at the prodigy of our will, which has overwhelmed the creature with its power, making of her the repetition of our own life. And oh, how happy, how enraptured we remain, because we find in her the sanctity that resembles us, our love that loves us, the intelligence that comprehends us, our power and goodness that move us to love mankind through the bonds of our sweetness. We recognize ourselves in her, finding the work of creation as we want it to be. One alone of these acts contains such wonders that they cannot find enough room in which to put themselves, such is their greatness. Only in our immensity can they find the place in which to stay, remaining fused with our own acts. What will our glory not be, as well as that of the creature, because her acts, by virtue of our Fiat, hold their place within the acts of her Creator. Oh, if all knew what it means to live in the divine will, to let it reign, they would compete with one another to let themselves be invested by it and become the repeaters of the divine life. Beloved Jesus became silent, and I remained immersed in the sea of the divine volition. And as though stupefied, I said, "My God, what heights can one who lives in your will reach?" And a crowd of thoughts, like many voices, kept speaking and speaking, but I am unable to repeat them. Maybe I will be able to repeat them when I am in the celestial fatherland, where I will possess the same language as up there. So, while I was feeling as though concerned, my highest good, Jesus, continued, "My daughter, do not be surprised. Everything is possible to my will. True love, when it is perfect, begins from oneself. The true model is the most holy Trinity. My celestial Father loved himself, and in his love he generated his Son. So he loved himself in his Son. I, his Son, loved myself in the Father, and from this love the Holy Spirit proceeded. In this loving of himself, the Heavenly Father generated one single love, one single power, sanctity, and so forth. And he bound the inseparable union of the three divine persons. When we created the creation, we also loved ourselves. So we loved ourselves in stretching out the heavens, in creating the sun. It was the love for ourselves that moved us to create many beautiful things worthy of us and inseparable from us. And when we created man, the love of ourselves became more intense. And as we loved ourselves in him, our love reproduced our life and likeness in the depth of his soul. One cannot give but what he possesses. And since our love was perfect, in loving ourselves, we could not separate ourselves from what came out from within us. Now, our will, in wanting the creature to live in it, in order to form its kingdom, loves itself, and in loving itself, it wants to give what it possesses. And only when it forms the repetition of our life, when it operates in the acts of the creature, and triumphant and victorious, to our greatest glory and honor, it brings them into our divine womb, so that we may recognize our own life in the acts of the creature who lives in our will. Then is it content. This is precisely the meaning of loving itself in all that it wants to do and produce. Giving itself in order to form another being similar to itself. Our will is the fecundator and sower of our life, and wherever it finds souls who are disposed, it loves itself. It fecundates them with its love, and sows in them its divine acts, which, united together, form the great prodigy of the divine life in the creature. Therefore, Abandon yourself prey to my will, and let it make of you whatever it wants, and we will be happy, you and us. Fiat. October 25th, 1937. The Sovereign Queen is the heiress of the divine will, and therefore the heiress of the divine life. How she made of herself a precious pledge in the creative hands of God. The great good contained in one act done in the divine fiat. I was doing my round in the acts of the divine will, and as I arrived at the conception of the Most Holy Virgin, I paused in order to offer to the divinity the power and the love which the divine persons had in conceiving this celestial lady, so as to obtain the coming of the kingdom upon earth. And my sweet Jesus, surprising me, told me, "My daughter, as this holy virgin was conceived, so did our feast start again with mankind." In fact, from the very first instant of her conception, she inherited our divine will, which immediately began its divine crafting within her beautiful soul, and in each of her heartbeats, thoughts, and breaths, our will formed, with its creative power, enchanting prodigies of sanctity, of beauty, and of grace, to the point that we ourselves, actors and spectators, together with our divine will, remained enraptured. And in our emphasis of love, we said, "How beautiful is the creature together with our will! She gives us ease to form our most beautiful works, and she gives life to our own life within herself." Our love rejoiced and celebrated, because our divine heiress, the heiress of our will and of our very life, had come out to the light of time. And since by virtue of our will operating in her, she was fully ours, exclusively our own, in looking at her, we felt our breath, our heartbeat, our love, ever burning and ever loving, and our own motions within hers. Our beauty shone through the movements of her pupils, of her little hands, and in the sweet enchantment of her enrapturing voice. She kept us so busy and festive that not even for one instant could we remove our gazes from her. So she belonged to us, fully our own. Our will was already hers by right, and we recognized in this holy creature our divine heiress, for by possessing our will she had already taken possession of it. There is a footnote here with regards to the word it meaning divine inheritance. So from the beginning of that sentence, so she belonged to us, fully our own. Our will was already hers by right, and we recognized in this holy creature our divine heiress, for by possessing our will, she had already taken possession of it, this divine inheritance. Now, this holy virgin possessed her own humanity, in which she bound the whole human family, almost like limbs to the body. And we, for love of her, seeing in her the whole of mankind. As soon as she was conceived, we gave the first kiss of peace to all humanity, constituting it the heir of our divine heiress, with the exception of some ungrateful ones who would not want to receive it. See, then, how certain it is that the kingdom of our will must come upon earth. There is already a creature who inherited it. And since she who inherited it is a creature that belongs to the human race, all creatures acquire the right to be able to possess it. This celestial sovereign, taken by love, made of herself a pledge in our creative hands, so that all could receive the kingdom. And since this pledge possessed the life of my will, it contained an infinite value, such that it could be pledged for all. What a sweet and dear pledge was this holy creature in our hands! By making her life and her acts flow into our divine volition, she formed divine coins to be able to pay us for those who were to inherit our divine fiat. Then came my humanity, united to the eternal Word, and with my life, pains, and death, I paid a sufficient price to purchase back this divine will of ours and give it to creatures as their inheritance. One act, one breath, one movement in my will contains such value as to be able to purchase heaven and earth, and anything it wants. Therefore, let my will alone be your life and your all. Afterwards, I continued to immerse myself inside the divine volition. What an enrapturing strength it possesses! Its sweetness, the attractions of its enchantment, are such that one would not want to lose even one breath. And my sweet Jesus added, "My daughter, the prodigies of my will are unheard of. Its power is so great that as the creature operates in my will, it calls into action all that she has done before, unites it together, and gives back to each act the merit, goodness, and power, as if the creature were doing it anew, enriching it with so much grace and beauty as to form the enchantment of all heaven. Then, as celestial dew, this act invests all the saints and gives them the new glory and happiness which the operating of the creature in my will contains. It then pours this dew upon all pilgrim souls, so that they may feel its power and grace in their acts. How many souls, burned by passions, by sin, by brutal pleasures, feel the freshness of this divine dew and are transformed in good. One act in my will overwhelms heaven and earth, and if it does not find souls who are disposed to receive such a good, it puts itself on the lookout, spying the circumstances, the occasions, and the disillusions of life, ready to invest them, embalm them, and give them the good it possesses. The acts in my will are never idle. They are pregnant with light, with love, with sanctity, with divine sweetness, and they feel the need to give light to those who live in darkness, to give love to those who are cold, to give sanctity to those who live in sin, to give divine sweetness to those who feel embittered. These acts, true children of my divine Fiat, never stop. They keep going around, even for centuries if needed, in order to give the good which they possess. And since they are animated and armed by its power, they can say, "We can do anything, because an omnipotent divine will gave us life." Fiat. October 31st, 1937. How an act of divine will contains such power and love that if God did not make a prodigy, the creature would not be able to contain this infinite act. The passport. My poor mind continues to cross the sea of the divine volition. It seems to me that it wants to say always new things on what it is able to do, and wants to do, inside the creature in whom it reigns. And since sweet Jesus takes great delight in speaking about his will, as soon as he sees the creature disposed to listen to his story, he assumes the primary role of narrator in order to make it known and loved. Therefore, repeating his little visit, he told me, "My daughter, if I wanted to speak to you always about my Fiat, I would always have new things to tell you, because, its story being eternal, it never ends, either what it is itself or what it can do in the creature. You must know that one act of my will in the creature contains such power, grace, love, and sanctity, that if my will did not operate a prodigy, the creature would not be able to contain it, because it is an infinite act, and what is finite is not capable of embracing it all. Listen to where its love reaches. As the creature disposes herself, calling my will into her act, my divine will operates. In operating, it calls its infinity, its eternal life, its power, which imposes itself over all, its immensity, which calls and embraces everyone and everything. No one can set himself aside from its operating. And once my will has enclosed everything, it forms its work. See then what an act of my will is. An infinite act, eternal, armed with divine power, immense, such that nobody can say, "I wasn't there in that act." Now these acts cannot be without producing a great divine glory for our Supreme Majesty, as well as an immense good for the creatures. Since they are acts done together with the creature, they operate as God does, and they bind God and the creature, God to giving, and the creature to receiving. They are like pretexts for our love, which says to us, "The creature gave us a place in her act. She gave us the freedom to do whatever we want. Therefore, our love imposes itself on us in order to make us give what we are, and also to honor ourselves, and for the honor of our operating will. Our love reaches such pretexts and yearning of love that it would never want us to stop giving, placing before us our immensity that never ends, our power that can give anything, our wisdom that can dispose anything. These acts are divine acts, and they can form the passport for other creatures, to let them enter into the kingdom of our will. They will give a child to our kingdom, so that the more acts are done in it, the more populated it will be, and all the good will flow upon those who have been the first to give life to my will in their acts. Now, you must know that the first passports were formed by me and by my celestial mother for the first children of my will, and they contain my signature, written with my blood, and with the sorrows of the Most Holy Virgin. To all other passports also runs my signature, otherwise they would not be recognized. Therefore, one who lives in my will has my life as origin, my love as heartbeat, my works and steps as endowment, and my very will as word. I feel myself in this creature, and oh, how I love her, and feel loved back by my same love. And the soul feels such joy and contentment, for she loves me no longer with her little love, but with my eternal love. She embraces me with my works. She runs after me with my steps. She feels that I am her life. She finds everything in me, and I in her. Therefore be attentive, daughter, if you want to render yourself happy and make me happy. After this I felt a little more in suffering, and I was coughing hard. And at every fit of coughing I asked that the divine will would come to reign upon earth. And my dear Jesus, all tenderness, squeezed me tightly in his arms, telling me, "My daughter, I knew you would ask for my will at every fit of your coughing, and I felt my heart being wounded and bursting with love. I felt as if I were receiving, in your coughing, my immensity that enveloped me and asked me for my will, my power and infinity that made all ask for my will to reign. So much so that I myself was forced to say, 'Will of mine, come to reign, delay no more.' I feel such violence that I do and say nothing other than what the creature does and says. Therefore, I want you to ask for my will in your pains, in the food you take, in the water you drink, in the work you do, in your sleep. I want you to engage your breath and heartbeat to ask for my will to come and reign. In this way, everything will be for you an occasion to ask for my will, even in the sun that fills your eyes, in the wind that blows upon you, in the sky that you see stretched above your head. Everything must be for you an occasion to ask me for my will to reign in the midst of creatures. By doing this, you will place many pledges in my hands, and the first pledge will be your whole being, so that you won't even move without asking for my will to be known and longed for by all. Fiat. You have reached the end of the Book of Heaven, Volume 35, Part 5. Fiat.